Benji, a vibrant and lively dog, sought a new forever home. Yet each time he found an adoptive family, he was soon returned to the shelter. The staff puzzled over the mystery of why no one could hold on to Benji. However, upon closer investigation, they uncovered a troubling truth. When it comes to choosing animal companions, few are as beloved and cherished as dogs. Their consistent happiness and playfulness around their owners make them endearing companions. In return, they ask only for basic care, to be fed, petted, and kept clean. However, not all dogs are fortunate enough to have a home, as shelters worldwide are filled with dogs yearning for the perfect family to take them in. Who can blame them? This brings us to a lesser-known dog named Benji. Though only 4 years old, he had already experienced quite a journey. His story was undeniably tragic. Having spent most of his life in a shelter, Benji had been adopted 7 times. Yet each time his new family would return him to the shelter after just a few days. This perplexed the shelter staff, as there was no consistent reason for his returns. Families would simply drop him off, offer feeble excuses, express gratitude to the staff, and swiftly depart, leaving Benji feeling disheartened and abandoned once more. This cycle was no way for the poor dog to live, and it appeared to take a toll on his spirits. Benji would light up with joy when chosen by a family, only to be crushed by rejection after just a few days. Imagine making a best friend and having an amazing few days with them, only for them to tell you that they don't want to be your friends anymore and walk away without giving you a reason why. This is what Benji had been through on 7 different occasions. It was heartbreaking, and the staff at the shelter struggled to make sense of the situation. There seemed to be no way to fix it or improve things for poor little Benji. Benji was one of the most loving and fun dogs in the shelter. He loved it when staff members would come and feed him or play with him, and he would thrive on being in the company of people. He would playfully bark at them and chase them around. He might have only been a small dog, but he was definitely full of beans. With no common issue, there was nothing that they could work on to make him a more suitable pet. So one day, a vet named Clara offered to take Benji home with her for a few days to see what he was like away from the shelter. Perhaps by observing his behavior firsthand, they would be able to pinpoint exactly what it was that families didn't like about him. She ushered him into a cage and took him home for a few days. Benji was again very excited to be going on yet another adventure. It seemed like you could never knock his spirit down too much, with him seeming to hope that each time he left the shelter, it was with his new forever family. Clara smiled at how excited he seemed, but in truth, she was a little worried and apprehensive about how the experiment would go. What if Benji was a nightmare away from the shelter? Could he be as bad or naughty as they said? She would just have to be patient and see. Only time would tell how little Benji the dog was going to react once they arrived at her house. Walking through her front door, Clara set the cage down in the living room. She opened up the front section, but rather than tipping Benji out, she patiently waited for him to emerge in his own time. It took a few hours, but he eventually walked out and started making himself at home. He was cautious and wary of a lot of things, but soon enough he settled himself in. He was walking around the room, sniffing everything, and happily bark-talking and wagging his tail. Benji definitely seemed happy enough to Clara the vet, who had had a long day at the shelter, and it was getting late, so she decided to go and get a shower while Benji continued to settle in. As she opened the living room door to leave, her elderly dog, Maxwell, wandered in. Maxwell was twice as big as Benji and slowly lumbered along, not seeming to care one jot about the new addition. But Benji, on the other hand, changed completely. He charged at Maxwell with his teeth bared, angrily barking. Benji might only have been a small dog, but he was surprisingly intimidating for his size. Clara quickly ushered Maxwell out of the room and closed the door after him. As soon as Maxwell was out of sight, Benji returned to his normal happy self, as if nothing had even happened. Suddenly, something clicked in Clara's head. Perhaps Benji's previous owners had witnessed this aggressive behavior, and they were covering for him when they returned him to the shelter. She made a mental note to look into this tomorrow. Arriving at work the next day, Clara pulled up all the info she could find on Benji's previous owners. She started making phone calls, determined to make sense of the situation. But after an hour of calming around and speaking to people, a very clear pattern started to emerge. All of the families had other pets in the house. Benji was being introduced into a household that had another dog or perhaps cats in them. Not all animals were suitable for company, and this detail is usually mentioned before adoption. The presence of other pets in the households was triggering violent defensive behavior in the little dog, resulting in his return to the shelter. None of the families wanted Benji to get into any kind of trouble, so they decided not to mention anything. In fact, it wasn't unheard of for violent dogs to end up being euthanized, as their behaviors kept them from finding a suitable home. No one wanted this for Benji, with each family hoping that the little dog would be able to find a forever family elsewhere. There was only one solution now. Clara would have to try training Benji to be calmer around other animals. It was a long shot, and there were no guarantees that the training would work. She started slowly by letting Benji see Maxwell only through a gate on the doorway. They could see each other and smell each other but not get to each other. Things remained tense for several days, and Benji would constantly growl angrily at Maxwell, who seemed to want to just be friends. Over time, though, Benji started to get used to Maxwell's presence, and the growling and angry barking eventually faded away. One evening, Clara felt confident enough to open the gate and let Maxwell and Benji come together. She was concerned that things could get violent very quickly, but as if by some miracle, Benji walked towards the elderly pet and sniffed him curiously. Benji's tail started wagging, and he seemed inclined to play. Clara was over the moon. She had done it. She had trained Benji to be sociable with other dogs. Benji and Maxwell played all day long and even curled up together to fall asleep. It really was heartwarming. But the time came where Clara had to take Benji back to the shelter, and she found that she couldn't say goodbye. So she made a big decision. She was going to adopt him herself. And so she did. Benji became part of the family and as amazing a pet as she could ever have hoped for. While Clara wasn't sure about Benji at first, he had proven himself to be an amazing little dog, if not a little misunderstood. It just goes to show that with the right care and attention, even the most scared and worried of animals can become fantastic pets. Could you and your family have provided Benji with a forever home, or would you have faced challenges with his unpredictable and mischievous behavior? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our channel. Thank you.